Now, if that is who we are, then clearly, based on our own personal experience of being moved and touched by other people's kindness and compassion, it is our responsibility to recognize we too can be the source of that kind of kindness, that kind of power, that kind of impact on other people's life. So valuing that part of who we are and appreciating its power, appreciating its role is an important step in making compassion a more active force. Because if you don't pay attention, you don't become aware, then you leave it at the mercy of a situation. And there is not much chance that you can actually tap into that. So that's the first element. The second element that His Holiness uses as part of his advocacy is to really constantly remind us the naturalness of the quality of compassion. Now, of course, in Buddhist language, we talk about the basic goodness of human nature. Now, in scientific terms, we would couch it in evolutionary language of our biological, social nature. And now, these days, studies after studies show the implications of what it means to be a social creature. There is I constantly, refer to this study, which I think is a very important one. There's a longitudinal study from Harvard Adult Development Research, where, just to be consistent, it was a study done on men who were interviewed in their 50s, and after 30 years, they were once again approached again, and they looked at many indicators of good life, longevity, and so on and so forth, socioeconomic status, overall health condition, so on and so forth. It turns out nothing beats the quality of a satisfying social connection, relationship. Wealth, socioeconomic status, overall health condition, nothing beats that indicator, which is a powerful indicator of who was living after, in their 80s, so longevity as well as good health. So that's who we are. That's a powerful indicator of our social nature. And also, His Holiness reminds us, and here he uses science a lot for the secular perspective. In early childhood development studies have shown that children as young as 14 months old display spontaneous helping behavior. So there are cute videos that have been based on research that was done by European scientists, particularly a team of 2 scientists. So that children, even when they're absorbed in the play, when they see an adult struggling, like carrying a box, a handful of magazine and dropping and not being able to pick it up, they look at the adults and they play. They look at the adults and finally they get up and pick up the book and help. So that's a very spontaneous helping behavior children display. And then the Yale Infant Cognition Study has shown how children pre-verbal age, as young as few months old, are able to differentiate between goodies and baddies, helpers and hinderers. And this involves cute experiments, which is cleverly designed with, objects with the kind of, with eyes and face so that they are more animated. And later, when they're shown, given a choice to choose which of the objects they want to choose, most children tend to go for the helper rather than the hinderer. So there seems to be an inbuilt, almost like a kind of a moral sensibility in human beings, even before language, that enables us to differentiate between a helper and a hinderer. So all of these are powerful indicators that our capacity for kindness, our capacity for empathy, our need for other people's love, others' care and compassion is very, very deeply rooted in our biology. And now, of course, non-human primate research scientists have shown that the presence of empathy is found even in non-human primate. So if that is true, then we're talking about a deep evolutionary roots for these qualities. So in other words, just reminding us the naturalness of qualities like empathy and compassion is an important part of that advocacy, so that we don't leave it as, sometimes we tend to, put compassion and altruism and these qualities too far away and associate with saintly qualities like, figures like Mother Teresa or His Holiness even, and then take them as an object of admiration, but not something that is for us to display. So I think reminding ourselves that it is a very natural human quality is an important part of that broader advocacy. And then the third one is drawing more from the Buddhist background. His Holiness, it reminds us, just because we have compassion naturally doesn't mean it's going to show up when we want it. What is needed is a conscious effort to actually cultivate it. We can, in other words, strengthen that muscle. And here the Gandhi's famous saying that compassion is a muscle that gets stronger by using it or exercising it. So that beautifully captures what His Holiness is trying to share with us, that we can actually cultivate it, we can make it more conscious, and we can really sort of make it a more active force through paying attention, through celebrating it, embracing it, and as much as possible tapping into that power within us in relation to dealing with our own situations in our own life, as well as our relationship with others and the world. And in fact, His Holiness would even recommend that not only that, but we should actually use compassion as a lens from which we should see everything in the world, including climate crisis, global issues, human conflict and war. If we can adopt compassion as part of our perspective, as a lens to look at these even huge challenges, we may find insights and approaches and solutions that may escape us otherwise. So I think that's an important point he's making. So one might ask, of course, compassion is hugely important, but there are so many other virtues. What about forgiveness? What about self-discipline? What about generosity? Why emphasize compassion? Why prioritize compassion? That is a good question. Those who are familiar with Buddhism know that in Buddhism we speak of 4 immeasurables: immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, sympathetic joy, and immeasurable equanimity. So why not promote all 4 of them equally instead of emphasizing compassion, like what His Holiness does, and I also do it in my own work, for example, such as through Compassion Institute that I co-founded and developed a 8-week compassion training program called CCT. So all of these programs very heavily focus and concentrate the energy on cultivation of compassion. One might say, for example, Mahayana Buddhism, which is the Dalai Lama's own tradition, speak of 6 perfections: generosity, morality, patience, and enthusiasm or joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. Why compassion? I think this is a good question. And I think by reflecting on this question in a deep way will really bring out the specificity of compassion. And here, before I respond, I want to draw attention to a beautiful statement that is attributed to the Buddha. It's from the Mayana Sutra, where there is the following statement: what is it, that single virtue, when you have it in your hand, all others' virtue come into your hand? It is compassion. So that's a statement from the Buddha, attributed to the Buddha. So yes, clearly there are other virtues, but by taking compassion as a primary focus, and this is particularly important for the Indian and Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there is an understanding that you can focus your energy on cultivating a key virtue, and then the other virtues will come as a byproduct. So let me take the example of the 4 immeasurables. By focusing our attention on compassion, Loving kindness comes as a precursor, because loving kindness is primarily, the role is to make us feel connected to fellow human beings, open our heart. Opening our heart is the function of loving kindness. So, and loving kindness primarily manifests in the form of wishing others well. So this friendliness, so the Sanskrit word maitri, or Pali word metta, and the Tibetan word champa, particularly the Sanskrit word and the Pali word, has a connotation of loving, but also a connotation of friendliness. So there is a sense of connection, there is a sense of wishing someone well. So in a sense, loving kindness arises as a form of a basis for compassion to arise. So the main emphasis is really on compassion, because the compassion is what motivates us. And in the Indian and Tibetan tradition, because the Bodhisattva ideal is such an important part of the tradition, and the Bodhisattva ideal is really to act, to engage in an altruistic action. So the action needs to come from motivation. And of the four immeasurables, the most important motivating factor is really compassion. So that's why the emphasis is really placed on compassion. And sympathetic joy is really comes as a way of dealing with successes of other people without giving in to tendency to feel jealous or envious. So if you are truly compassionate, when you see others succeed, you will have a joy. You will take joy in others' life, others' good fortune. And then equanimity here, the equanimity in four immeasurables is not a question of even-mindedness. It's a question of, having a resilience so that you're not easily shaken up by, hostile environment, as well, or hostile circumstances, as well as conditions that would otherwise give rise to afflictions, such as aversion, attachment, and so on. So these qualities, if you have compassion fosters courage, and by creating more space for others' suffering in our life, in our heart, courage kicks in, and courage fosters a more resilient mind. So equanimity also arises as a byproduct. Similarly, with respect to six perfections, generosity is the expression of a truly compassionate heart. A true generosity comes from a genuine sense of concern for the other person, and then you are helping them primarily through material means. Similarly, morality, the heart of morality is refrain from harming others. So if you take compassion seriously, there is no danger of causing harm on others.